Hello, and thank you for joining me for this information update for customers in the Loddon water resources system. I just want to give you an update about where water resources are now travelling compared to where we were at the start of this year. So in the course of this short presentation, I'll be just running through why we're here, talking about what are the Loddon system conditions as they are now, how has this changed and what has caused it, and what this means for customers across the next few months. Now, earlier this water year, in July 2016, we came to speak to customers about the water availability in the Loddon system, and there were a few risks that applied at the time. At the time it was raining, so we were hopeful that they wouldn't eventuate. But we came out to say that we did have some reservations about the ability to supply water all the way through if we didn't get some good rainfall. Now, we want to update you on what has happened since, because there's been some significant changes that have occurred across the water resources availability in the Loddon system. Now, when I talk about the Loddon system, I'm talking about three different water supply systems. One is the regulated surface water, which is referred to as the seasonal determinations, and is supplied predominantly out of Cairncurran and Tullaroot reservoirs. Also talk about the unregulated systems, which are the waterways that people divert from that aren't controlled by dams, and also groundwater, which people can access from in a couple of areas across the Loddon system. At the start of this year, the shortage of water that we were facing at the time was really brought home by having a zero seasonal determination on the 1st of July. And at the time we were a bit nervous about how that might pan out for the rest of the year. Now, since that time, we've seen significant change in all of our systems across northern Victoria, and the Loddon's been no exception, where we've now got to a point where we can match the Goulburn allocation, which is part of how the Loddon system operating rules apply. If we can have resources that match the Goulburn, we match the Goulburn system allocation. If resources cannot match the Goulburn, we actually have to announce a lower allocation in the Loddon system. So at the moment, the Loddon has got 73% of high reliability water shares available to customers, and we're assuming that that will continue to increase throughout the rest of this year. In terms of the unregulated streams, the Loddon was pretty hard hit in terms of water access to water for the first part of the year. At the time, at the start of this water year, I should say, we'd seen dry conditions dominating for the past few months. And at the time we had 23 out of 39 streams on some form of suspension. Since that time, with the significant rainfall and resumption of good stream flows, all restrictions have been lifted, and the Loddon is now free of restriction, as are all the other streams across northern Victoria. In terms of groundwater availability, for those customers who are part of the groundwater management plan for the Loddon Highlands water supply protection area, the Waubra zone has 100% of licensed volume available. The customers in the Ascot and Blampede zones have access to 75% of their entitlement, and in the Newland zone, customers have only 50% of water available to them. However, we can announce a revised availability by November, and there's some very good chances of improvement across the Ascot, Blampede and Newland zones, with some very significant rainfall and potential for recharge events having occurred in the last few weeks. In the other system, the Mid-Loddon groundwater management area, customers have access to 100% of their supply. So what has changed to bring about the changed availability and access to water over the rest of this year? Well, I think it's best illustrated if we look at the storage traces for Cairncurran and Tullaroot reservoirs as an indicator of just what's happened in terms of water availability and catchment runoff. So in terms of Cairncurran, we'd seen some significant degradation of water volume. This is a graph of time versus or volume versus time. So over the last 2 or so years, we've seen the storage being drawn down under the effects of use, but also of things such as evaporation and the impact of very low inflows. until we get to approximately the start of this water year in July, where after some wet conditions in the last couple of months prior to July, we've seen some 3 wet months continuously I should say, and up until a point in the last week or so where we've got Cairn Curran up to around about 95-96% of capacity. It's currently sitting with about 5,000 megalitres of the dam still to be filled, which, depending on rainfall over the next few months or the few weeks even, we'll look to take that to full. But obviously we'll try and keep a little bit of airspace in the dam in case we get some significant rainfall events. The other key storage has been Tullaroop, and just on this graph and the previous one, it starts in July 2007, which was some of the worst conditions of the millennium drought, and you can see that we were tracing a very low. We didn't get to that point in 2015-16, although we weren't that far from it. But since that time we've seen a rapid resumption of volume in Tullaroop Reservoir. It had been a bit of a slow process. It was taking time to actually start to react to some of the rainfall that we'd had since May. But in the last couple of months, or the last couple of weeks in particular, there was some significant inflows into Tullaroop Reservoir, which has actually seen it go to 100% and spill at relatively low rates into the Tullaroop Creek downstream. The other way at which we can look at to illustrate some of the changes is if we compare the resource diagrams for the Loddon regulated system at the start of the water year compared to where we are with the most recent allocation. So at the start of the water year we had less resource available than we did remaining commitments, so we weren't able to make an allocation, as I said earlier. And we had quite a discrepancy between the two in the order of 15 gigalitres. Now, since that time, we've actually seen a very significant increase in available resources, and we've actually been able to put some water aside for 2017-18, which we hadn't been able to do from 2015-16 into this water year, 2016-17. So that's a really good outcome as we currently stand, and that's only going to improve in the next seasonal determination, because this is about 2 weeks old as I'm talking to you now. If we look at how recent events have compared with the experiences of 2015-16, we only received 3.9 gigalitres into Cairn Curran Reservoir as at one of the key storages in 2015-16, and that was only 3% of the long-term average, and we'd actually see higher volumes in 99 years out of 100. Now in June we actually saw 1.6 gigalitres flow in, so about 50% of what we received for the whole 12 months. And that still had a fairly significant probability of exceedance, or it would still be exceeded in 77 years out of 100. Now, we'd actually seen significant improvement occur in some of the other systems, but we hadn't quite seen that same sort of behaviour occurring over in the western part of the Golden Murray Water region. Since that time, we have seen that improvement occur, and we can see that in the first 2 months of the 16-17 water year, we've had 43 gigalitres flow in, so much more than we had for the entire 12 months previously. And even in the month of August alone, we had 24 gigalitres flow in, which is just around about average, a little bit below average, but still being beaten in 39 years out of 100. So some really good change around in terms of what was happening in the catchment above Cairn Curran, and we were seeing similar impacts or similar behaviour occurring above Tullaroop. Now, when we have September data available, I would expect to see that we'd have some very significant inflows for the month, given that we've had some very high rainfall and we've seen some flooding occurring in the Loddon catchment itself. In terms of what the next few months will bring to the Loddon catchment, the September to November rainfall outlook produced by the Bureau of Meteorology had indicated we'd have approximately or slightly above average conditions in terms of rainfall for that period. Now, we've certainly seen through September that we've been probably above average across most of our areas, which has been a good outcome and again has contributed to those changing conditions that we've seen. Now, should that persist through October and November, we're going to see some very good water availability for the rest of the year, particularly as the catchments are pretty well saturated at this point, and we're seeing runoff being generated far more quickly than we were in the last water year. This update will probably, this outlook will be updated later on in September, towards the end of the month. At the moment, the weather conditions across northern Victoria are being dominated by an event called the Indian Ocean Dipole, which is a measure of water temperature in the Indian Ocean. At the moment, because it's negative between the 2 points, it's actually bringing moisture across Australia, which can generate rainfall. And the Bureau of Meteorology is indicating that negativity of the dipole is weakening, so it's trending back towards neutral conditions. But while it's negative, it typically brings above average spring or winter and spring rainfall, and that's certainly occurred to help a number of customers out this year in terms of increasing water availability compared to last year. It's likely to continue until the end of spring, but it's always hard to tell with natural phenomena such as that. The other thing I've got up here is potentially El Nino La Nina. And for the last few months, models that the Bureau of Meteorology refers to have been indicating there is a chance of a La Nina event occurring. And a La Nina event typically brings above average winter-spring rainfall as well. It hasn't quite developed, and the chances are diminishing with time. But while the conditions are potentially favouring that, it is indicating that we're in neutral conditions, and the neutral conditions are reinforcing the impacts of the Indian Ocean Dipole, which has really led to the wetter conditions that we see. So what does this information mean for yourselves as customers? Well, effectively for all people in the regulated and unregulated systems, the system will run for the whole year, which is something that we weren't able to guarantee only 3 months ago. The deliveries of carryover are available all year, and we're going to have operating reserves. As I showed earlier, we've already got some, and we're hoping to have enough for the year so we can guarantee that we'll have a significant opening allocation on 1 July 2017, looking into the future. In terms of groundwater users, there's still a bit of work to be done in terms of bringing allocations up, but all indications of recent times are showing some good recovery in terms of groundwater levels, and that should be reflected in some change to at least 1 or 2 of those zones that we spoke about earlier. In terms of the regulated surface conditions and the seasonal determinations, we'll continue to update those on the 1st and the 15th of each month through to the point where we have all 6 systems that we look at sitting on 100% of high reliability water shares, and hopefully we'll be at that point fairly shortly. The next announcement that we will be making for water availability in the Loddon system and all the other 5 systems will be made on Monday the 3rd of October. In terms of providing further information for any queries that you may have, please refer to the Golden Murray Water website or the Northern Victorian Resource Manager website, or if you want to speak to someone, speak to your local customer service coordinator or perhaps your local diversions inspector. If you have any feedback for anything associated with Golden Murray Water, by all means, please feel free to contact us at reception@gmwater.com.au, and basically, the resource conditions have turned around significantly, and we wish you all the best for the coming year. Thank you.